This video is brought to you by Teepublic. Support independent artists such as myself with these hot new designs on t-shirts, masks, mugs, pins, and phone covers. Link is in the description.
It's fall on ABC. All the kids are saying.
CBS Saturday morning is smoking. Saturday morning on Fox Kids.
Saturday morning cartoons was a huge staple of American pop culture. After a long week of school, there's nothing better than to sit in front of the TV, eat your sugary cereal, and watch some of the animated programs airing that morning on the 5 networks. Today, with the rise of streaming services like Netflix, Disney Plus, and HBO Max, and television slowly dying, children can watch their favorite cartoons anytime they want, making waking up on a weekend to watch them a thing of the past. However, one of the pioneers of Saturday morning cartoons would arguably be the animation studio Hanna-Barbera. Founded by former MGM animators William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, these two men will create some of the most legendary and memorable cartoon characters of the 20th century for nearly 4 decades. Join me, 47 Cartoon Guy, as I go through the rich history of one of the most influential animation studios and the impact they made on pop culture. So let's not waste any time, let's get started.
Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear. Yogi Bear is always in the ranger's hair. The biggest show in town is Huckleberry Hound for all you guys and gals. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, looking for you. Scooby-Doo, where are ya?
William Denby Hanna was born in 1910 in Melrose, New Mexico. Later on, his family moved west to Los Angeles. Hanna was a shy outdoor enthusiast, and for many years, he was an Eagle Scout, later being promoted to Scoutmaster as an adult. Hanna also had a love for music, which carried over to his animation career, as he wrote many of the songs for some of the cartoons he helped create, like the Flintstones.
Meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family. From the town of Bedrock, history.
Bill studied journalism and engineering at Compton City College, but he had to drop out due to the Great Depression. It took a number of odd jobs. One of them was working with his father on the construction on the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. It was there he learned about a new company that was headed by 2 men from Kansas City, Rudolph Ising and Hugh Harman, who had recently then parted with Walt Disney, who started his own animation studio. The two had been hired to create cartoons for Warner Brothers through Leon Schlesinger. Despite a lack of formal art training, Hanna applied for a job and was hired.
I started in the cartoon business in 1930 with Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising making the first Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies.
Hanna started out as a custodian and cell washer until eventually becoming head of the ink and paint department. Hanna enjoyed the company of his supervisors and sometimes stayed after hours to contribute songs and pitch gags, which were later used in some of the studio's Bosco cartoons. Hanna was able to convince Hugh to let him work on the timing of the cartoons as well. After a business disagreement with Schlesinger, Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising began producing cartoons independently for MGM in 1933, and Hanna followed them, eventually getting the opportunity to direct his first cartoon, To Spring. After Rudolph and Ising's contract was up, the two left MGM, but Hanna stayed. MGM decided to open their own animation studio and was now under the leadership of former theater owner Fred Quimby.
MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, was like a city. It had its own fire department, its own police department, a boss, Louis B. Mayer. It was the Tiffany's of movie studios.
The mandate from Louis B. Mayer is with MGM's the biggest, greatest studio in Hollywood, we should have the finest of everything. Why don't we have the finest cartoons?
MGM's first series was based on a comic strip called Captain and the Kids. Hanna was the director, along with Bob Allen and Friz Freleng, but the cartoons never took off with audiences, and the shorts were canceled. At that time, Freleng left from MGM to go back to Schlesinger, and MGM rehired Rudolph and Ising.
And it was there that I met Joe.
Joseph Roland Barbera was born on March 24, 1911. The son of Sicilian immigrant parents, Barbera grew up in New York City. He was suave, smooth, and a man of many talents. He was a skilled boxer, a career choice he turned down, and had a passion for drawing. After school, he landed a job at the Irving Trust Bank and took several art classes at night. Barbera submitted his cartoons to popular magazines in Manhattan, but after a string of rejections, his artworks was finally published in Collier's Weekly. Joe was one of the many moviegoers that was fascinated by the Disney Silly Symphony short, The Skeleton Dance. So much so that Joe Barbera wrote to Walt Disney in California, and a future media mogul wrote back, promising he would look him up during his next trip to New York. Unfortunately, Walt never got back in touch with Joe. Despite this, Joe still had an interest in animation and took a job at a studio of Max Fleischer's, but quit after 4 days. But he gained a better position at Van Buren Studios, a small animation studio owned by RKO. Barbera was able to impress his boss with his ability to create cartoon gags and moved him up to animator and storyman. Unfortunately, this would be a job he would lose due to the Great Depression. He then moved to Terrytoons, the studio who would later be famous for Mighty Mouse, Heckle and Jekyll, oh yeah, and this.
Somebody touch my spaghetti!
Joe worked as an animator, hoping to become more involved in the story process. In fact, he went to Paul Terry, founder of Terrytoons, to present a storyboard with an original character he created, a pilot named Dirty Doug. Paul wasn't impressed. Joe wasn't satisfied with his time at Terrytoons, so he quit after 7 months and moved to MGM. It was at MGM where Bill and Joe first met, and out of boredom, decided to come up with an idea of their own.
Pretty soon, we were sitting there in a room. He ended up in the room with me as storyman. So one time I said, why don't we do a cartoon of our own? Well, we're sitting here, So we set the pattern for the way it was going to work out. Oh, we decided to do a cat and a mouse, which had been done 4,000 times before that. It was about as original as my foot, Nevertheless, I wanted to do a cat and mouse because, number one, the minute you see a cat and mouse on the screen, you know there's conflict. And you got chase. And I loved that whole idea. So we designed a cat and a mouse.
On February 10th, 1940, Bill and Joe's creation, the animated short Puss Gets the Boot, was released to theaters. It featured a mouse named Jinx being harassed by a cat named Jasper. After breaking a vase during a chase, Jasper gets a strict warning by his owner, Mammy Two Shoes.
Now understand this, Jasper. If you breaks one more thing, you is going out. O-W-T out.
Yeah, we'll get to her later. Jumping at this opportunity, Jinx wastes no time making Jasper's life a living hell so he could get thrown out the house. During production, the staff at MGM merely scoffed at the idea, especially Fred Quimby.
People were saying, what a dumb idea. Where's the purple giraffe, and the pink hippopotamus? In the meantime, Quimby, in his wisdom, said, don't make any more of them. He says, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
The short was a huge hit. It even got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Short, only to lose to another MGM short, The Milky Way. Coincidentally enough, another short that was up for an Oscar that year was the very first defined Bugs Bunny cartoon, A Wild Hare, directed by famed animation legend and friend of Bill's, Fred Tex Avery. Starting with the next cartoon, The Midnight Snack, the cat and mouse duo were finally given their names, Tom and Jerry, and would go on to star in 114 cartoon shorts for MGM. Audiences fell in love with these characters, with Tom's sneaky, antagonistic arrogance mixed with Jerry's fun-loving, mischievous nature, both personalities made from well-timed cartoon slapstick. Hanna and Barbera managed to keep the formula fresh, be introducing new recurring characters, such as Spike the Bulldog and his son Tyke, a little duck who Jerry protects, a nephew of Jerry's named Nibbles, and a constant change of owners for Tom. I suppose I should also address the elephant in the room. While Tom and Jerry was and still is one of the best of the golden age of animation, like most cartoons of the era, there were certain jokes, gags, and characters that could now be considered bad taste, particularly the character Mammy Two Shoes. She was voiced by black actress Lillian Randolph, who was best known for playing Maze at the time. The character speaks in a stereotypical manner.
Yes, sir, Thomas, you is a hero. Here's the reward for getting rid of that mouse.
It's uncomfortable to watch, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. And while I don't think it's nearly as offensive as what other studios were doing, any way you look at it, it's still in bad taste. In the 60s, when the shorts aired on CBS Saturday mornings, Mammy was redrawn to be a thin white woman. And in the 90s, her voice was redubbed by actress Thea Vidal.
Thomas? Man, that mouse sure did get demobilized.
While these hurtful images were wrong then and wrong today, removing them and pretending they didn't exist can be just as harmful. That's why many of these cartoons have been restored to their original form on DVD and Blu-ray for historical reasons. The shorts would become so popular they would be nominated for 13 Academy Awards, but winning 7. Tom and Jerry also became pop culture icons. During this time, they would appear in advertisements, comics, even cameos, dancing with the likes of Gene Kelly and swimming with Esther Williams. Of course, Fred Quimby, who put down the idea at first, had no problem accepting the Oscars.
Fred Quimby was the one who went up and got the Oscar each time. Because it's always the producer is the one who goes up to get the Oscar.
There is a series of photos of the Tom and Jerry unit posing with these 7 Oscars. They got those photos by waiting until Quimby went to lunch and then sneaking into his office with a camera. That's as close as they ever got to it.
As the shorts went on, the evolution of the characters would begin to change, not only in style, but in tone as well. The shorts became more violent, more energetic, and fast-paced, thanks to the influence of MGM's newest director, Tex Avery.
When Tex Avery came to MGM in the early 40s from Warner Brothers, he really hit his stride. He was doing funny cartoons at Warner's, but he still hadn't really blossomed as the outrageous master of comedy timing and outlandish gags that he became. And when he started making those cartoons there, you can bet that Bill and Joe were paying attention.
The Tom and Jerry unit at MGM was a well-oiled machine. A typical idea for a cartoon might begin with a brainstorming session by the crew, where gags, situations, and titles were tossed. Barbera would then draw the whole storyboard, and once it was done, Hanna would take it, time the action on exposure sheets, and hand the scenes over to the animators. The animators, who would later become future Hanna-Barbera employees, included Carl Vinci, Irv Spence, Ed Barge, Ken Muse, Ray Patterson, as well as a few others. Also, an office boy at MGM was a young man named Jack Nicholson. Yes, that Jack Nicholson. He was offered a job as an in-betweener, but he declined, and the rest, as they say, is history. And let's not forget those iconic sound effects.
They were, among the brashest sound effects in any cartoon. If Tom steps on a board that's loose, the sound you hear is a gunshot. And it's almost like this violent sound that really makes the gag even funnier.
By the way, all of Tom's screams were done by Bill Hanna himself. Scott Bradley's orchestrations also played a huge part of the shorts.
Scott Bradley is one of the most unsung film composers, I think, in the history of film.
There's something about that big, full MGM orchestra that's part of the musicals and part of the epic dramas that they would do. And to hear that same orchestra, emoting for Tom or Jerry in a particular scene is funny unto itself. The music tells you if Jerry is happy or Tom is sneaky. You know, it really tells the audience, it signals what the mood is of that scene.
After the retirement of Fred Quimby, Bill and Joe were promoted to the head of MGM Animation Department, still continuing to work on Tom and Jerry shorts, Droopy cartoons, and several one-offs. Little did they know, their tenure at MGM was about to come to an end.
Yes, you'll find this Westinghouse set so easy to enjoy. The smoothest operating television you can get today.
Television became commercially available in the mid-50s, and everyone was getting one. This meant bad news for theaters, which were losing revenue at the box office, and the studios were trying new gimmicks to get more butts in seats, such as 3D. That wasn't the only problem.
But Tom and Jerry was so successful that when we re-released cartoons that we did 4 years ago and brought them back and re-released them again, they did as well as new cartoons. So they said brilliantly, ho, we can save production of new cartoons by just re-releasing the cartoon. And in doing so, they would save maybe, I think the number they were talking about was $600,000 or $700,000 by not doing any new ones. Well, I tell you, here's 2 adults who thought they were sitting on top of the world suddenly find themselves out of work. But total quick, like with about 2 weeks' salary after 20 years, you know, that's all you got.
It was our belief that we would still be at MGM making Tom and Jerry cartoons today. And it didn't take long, though, until you could see that the handwriting was on the wall. And MGM, the cartoons that we were making, they were used, but you could see that television was making big inroads on the box office, the money. We felt that we could probably continue. Even then, we thought maybe we could make stuff for television, but there was no real thinking of that at all until they closed the studio, and then we started thinking TV right away.
The Tom and Jerry shorts ended its run in 1958 with its final cartoon Bill and Joe directed together, Tot Watchers, and the MGM Cartoon Studio was closed down. 3 years later, MGM revived the Cat and Mouse duo for new shorts, directed by the late Czech animator Gene Deitch, and made by European animation studio Rembrandt Films. These shorts were often low-budget, crude-looking, and surreal, with weird sound design and mumbled dialogue.
Gene told me, I think they got 3 Tom and Jerry's to look at. They sent them 3 prints. I don't know which ones they were, but that's what the animators had to study to learn to draw the characters. They didn't get any model sheets, no old drawings, nothing. Just send them 3 prints of old Tom and Jerry. Said, okay, this is enough for you.
This run didn't last long. It ended in 1962. But the shorts were commercially successful and gained a cult following in recent years. In 1963, animator Chuck Jones, who was just fired from Warner Brothers, created some new shorts. Chuck was not a fan of the original Tom and Jerry's, and had trouble adapting his own style into the series, which explains why they feel like pale imitations of his Roadrunner cartoons. While Jones' cartoons were better received, his run with the characters ended in 1967, and he moved on making television specials in a 1970 fantasy film, The Phantom Toll Booth. With the closing of the MGM Animation Department, Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera began contemplating the idea of producing cartoons for television. After all, they have some experience. They were the ones responsible for the animation for the opening credits of the famous sitcom I Love Lucy. This was back when they were still under contract with MGM, and Fred Quimby was none the wiser. So in 1957, HB Enterprises opened its doors on a lot of Kling Studios, formerly Charlie Chaplin Studios. George Sidney, the director of Acres Away, served as Bill and Joe's business partner, and their distributors were Screen Gems, a subsidiary of Columbia Pictures. Most of their animators at MGM became the new staff at HB, along with conductor and composer Hoyt Curtin. Because there are massive layoffs in the animation industry, they were able to hire writers like Mike Maltese, Warren Foster, and animators like Tony Benedict, Willie Ido, and Alex Lovey. When Disney's Sleeping Beauty ended production, many of the animators who were just laid off migrated to HB Enterprises. With movie studios shutting down their animation divisions, leaving many out of work, To these talented artists, Hanna-Barbera was more than an animation studio. It was a godsend. On Saturday morning, December 14th, 1957, the Ruff and Reddy show aired on NBC. And while it wasn't the first cartoon to air exclusively for television, it was the first show from Hanna-Barbera, which would be the beginning of the studio's long legacy. Before then, Saturday mornings for kids usually consisted of serials like Lone Ranger, Ren Tin Tin, and puppet shows like Howdy Doody. And cartoons that did air were usually theatrical shorts rebroadcast for television. Ruff and Reddy revolved around the adventures of a dog and cat, who were the best of friends, with live-action segments hosted by TV personality Jimmy Blaine. While not particularly memorable, it was the first show that used a new innovative technique, limited animation. Since budgets for television were higher, fewer drawings were needed. The budget for a typical Tom and Jerry cartoon would be around $50,000, but as Screen Gems, they were given $2,700 for 5 minutes.
Limited animation. Now, a lot of people don't understand what that means, and they think it's not great animation. But if you don't have the money, you have to think of some other way to do it.
According to William Hanna, back at MGM, our budget was lavish enough to allow as many as 60 drawings per foot of fully animated film. It was a new ball game for TV. In order to meet our budget for Ruff and Reddy, we had to pare the drawings down to no more than 1 or 2 per foot of film. It was also decided that the voice actors were needed to help balance out the noticeably cheaper animation. Unlike the silent Tom and Jerry, Ruff and Reddy would speak and would be performed by actors Daws Butler, who done several voices for MGM and Warner Brothers, and Don Messick, an announcer and former ventriloquist. The two will become Hanna-Barbera's longtime voice actors and remain with the company until their respective deaths. Butler in 1988 and Messick in 1997. Daws Butler will be best known for voicing Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, Elroy Jetson, Snagglepuss, Wally Gator, and countless others. While Don Messick's famous role will be Scooby-Doo, he would also be known for Boo Boo Bear, Ranger Smith, Bam Bam Rubble, Astro from the Jetsons, Dr. Bennett Quest, Ricochet Rabbit, Adamant, Muttley, and many more. Other Hanna-Barbera voice actors will later include regulars like John Stevenson, Julie Bennett, Howard Morris, Doug Young, and Janet Waldo. Even the man of 1,000 voices himself, Mel Blanc, lent his voice to some of the most famous characters from the studio. Ruff and Reddy aired for 3 seasons on NBC and would later end its run in 1960. While this show was a hit for Bill and Joe's new company, the best was yet to come. If you want to support this series and many other videos, click the link below to my Patreon. You get a special credit, early access, shout out to your channel or blog, even a cartoon character commissioned by me. And also don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I thank you, and I gotta fly.
Mamá, yo quiero, oh mamá, yo quiero, mamá, yo quiero, mamá, dash a pepper, dash a pepper sauce American way. Mamá, yo quiero, mamá, yo quiero, mamá, yo quiero, mamá, dash a pepper, sauce America, yo quiero, mamá.